All right, can everyone hear me? All right, I'll let some people in right away. All right, um, everyone hears me, right? Give me a thumbs up if I'm coming in loud and clear. Awesome. Okay, so let me get the conversation started in this way. And I am interested in feedback, and we can have a bit of a debate, etc. So, J6 was an attempt to maintain Donald Trump in office for at least 4 years. Now, it's not quite a Macht Ergreifung, as they say in the German context. Although, interesting, if we look back at, what became National Socialist Germany, it is interesting. It's a little more, it's not quite maybe what you might imagine of a bunch of thugs going in and taking over the government. They did it legally. That's kind of what creates this ambiguous quality to the whole thing. But we're not going to talk about the 1930s. We're going to talk about the 2020s. It was an attempt to maintain Donald Trump in office. There was a legal theory that accompanied this attempt. This legal theory was created by John Eastman and involved rejecting the votes that were certified by the states. As you might know, voting takes place in a very Byzantine manner in the United States. It takes place through the states, the state governments do this. And obviously, we have the electoral college, so we just have all these layers of layers of bureaucracy before we get an actual national leader, chief executive in the form of the president. So there was a legal theory about how this could have been done, and it involved a alternate sets of electors in some states. It involved rejecting them outright. It might have involved claiming that it was a hung election in effect and throwing it to Congress, whereby Donald Trump could maintain power. There was a legal theory behind it. There also was a populist revolt. And I agree with many people who say that on some level, J6 was a rally that got out of hand. And there are some excuses to be had for the people who attended J6. We had been locked up to a large degree in our homes for much of 2020. The BLM riots seem to be a situation in which, many actually peaceful protesters, let's be honest here, but, just many thugs, criminals, maniacs were just being let off scot-free and causing mayhem. So there was a lot of strong feelings. Secondly, there was the notion, or I guess you could say myth in all senses of the word, of the stolen 2020 election. And there was a extremely popular, though entirely underground, movement that we call QAnon, that was getting people hopped up on all sorts of things. So, to be fair, to some degree, this was a rally that went haywire, and then people rushed in. I've mentioned this anecdote a few times. It's really my favorite anecdote of the J6 period, where there was a journalist recording this woman, and she came out of the Capitol and she said, oh my God, they tear gassed me. And, oh, I was shoved around and beaten, half to death. And he said, oh, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. What were you doing? And she said, it's a revolution. So on the one hand, she thought that this was an actual revolution. And on the other hand, she thought that the cops were abusing power by stopping her from revolting. I mean, another aspect of this is just the kind of ridiculous hijinks that incurred inside the Capitol. We know the guy who stuck his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. We've heard of the Groyper girl who, I mean, seemingly sincerely wanted to steal Nancy Pelosi's laptop and send it to Russia. So it was all these kind of intense online communities spilling over into the real world and mayhem ensuing. So it was a coup that was utilizing the structures of the MAGA movement. So you had the legal gurus, the John Eastman types, Federalist Society member, etc. You had the online alternative media, of which QAnon was a outlandish example of. And I think to a very large degree, we forget this, to a very large degree, the alternative media was either directly interested in Q, like Alex Jones, who of course rejected Q, when it didn't matter, but was promoting Q when it actually mattered. And a lot of people who are kind of like Q adjacent, they might not fully believe in Q, they might not fully be reading Q, but they would use Q's language in many cases. Steve Bannon claimed beforehand, this is the storm, et cetera, et cetera. And they were basically reinforcing QAnon. And so this coup utilized the alternative media. It utilized populist yahoos, let's say, people who it got out of control. And maybe, we have some excuses for those folks, but it did get out of control. And it had a legal quality, it had a populist quality, it had an online quality. It did not fully have a military quality. Now, there's some, let's say, evidence, or maybe more accurately, insinuation about Michael Flynn and his brother. But needless to say, the military didn't go along with this deal. And thus, it proves an important point. In order to actually do a coup, the legal theory can come afterward, because legality in itself emanates from politics. So I'm a Hobbesian, I guess you could say, or a Schmittian. So you can come up with some legal justification for what you did later. And I think it's almost telling that these conservative legal charlatans came up with a theory beforehand. So it was like, we're going to use the legal mechanism of the system to overthrow the system. Well, it didn't work. Secondly, I think a coup d'etat, an actual coup d'etat, is all but impossible absent military involvement. And, I have to say this as well. It's not impossible, but I would say it's very difficult to accomplish without mainstream media involvement. During major episodes in the collapse of the Soviet Union, there is, particularly in the kind of aborted hardliner take back in the 90s, 94, I believe, they play Swan Lake on the on television. And it's, Tchaikovsky's great ballet. It's a way of just putting people to sleep, I guess, or giving them a sense that all is fine. The fact is, you're going to need to legitimize yourself if you are going to take power, or if, at the very least, if you're going to install Donald Trump in for another 4 years. You need trusted, authoritative voices telling the public that this is actually a good thing, or it's simply not going to work. You can't have Alex Jones and Tim Pool telling the public that this is a good thing. It's just not going to work. And I think this is something that the alternative media that is just like endlessly announcing the end of the mainstream media, I think they just don't get it. They just don't get it on some level. Another thing that has bothered me, well, two things have bothered me. First off, I totally agree with many conservative criticisms of the liberals' almost turning this event into this like sacred holiday. And, we need to endlessly elect Joe Biden and people like Joe Biden to protect our democracy and et cetera. By the way, Joe Biden is kicking people off state ballots in the upcoming primary. So it starts to ring a little hollow. It also rings hollow when Joe Biden is giving the green light to Israel to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. This idea of we need to protect our democracy. Yeah, that note is clanging. It's a bit out of tune at this point, and it's jarring to the ears. So I agree with a lot of what the right will say about this, but I also find on the right, and this is something that really drives me nuts, it's called broken kettle logic. It's a kind of Freudian notion of overdeterminism, you could say. So the broken kettle logic goes like this. So I borrow a kettle from my neighbor and I return it to him and it's cracked. And my neighbor says, "What the fuck, man?" And I said, "Well, first off, I didn't crack your kettle. Secondly, the kettle was cracked when you loaned it to me. And thirdly, I never borrowed the kettle in the first place." So basically, it goes something like that. It's various illogical and incompatible excuses for something. It's kind of, you're almost over determining your innocence while not ever really, while ultimately kind of, I guess, implying your guilt or doing it in such an illogical fashion that no one can take you seriously. So from what I hear from the right is no MAGA supporter would have done this. But also, MAGA supporter and patriot Ashley Babbitt was brutally executed by the Capitol Police, perhaps at the behest of Nancy Pelosi. So you kind of can't have it both ways. You really can't have it both ways. You also can't imply that someone like Ray Epps, who was saying, beforehand, let's go into the Capitol, et cetera, that this guy was some sort of mastermind, amazing propagandist on the level of Edward Bernays, who somehow whispered into everyone's ear and somehow convinced hundreds of people to enter the Capitol. You also can't go about and say that, the dude who put his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, well, he's a hero, and so on. Well, I kind of get the outrage at government. But he's not a hero. This demonstrates what I'm saying. You can't say that this was merely a riot that gets out of hand when Donald Trump himself said, "I'm going to walk with you down Pennsylvania Avenue in order to make a ruckus and encourage, inspire, scare maybe the senators into rejecting the votes." That was said. So this wasn't just a Trump rally. This was something else. And you can't have it all sorts of ways. It can't be a patriotic event that should go down in history and also an FBI psyop. It can't be, we have our poor patriots in prison, but Antifa did it. It can't be Ray Epps is a socialist mastermind who tricked us into doing it, when we've all seen the video of people pushing through police. In some cases, the police just kind of standing back. Look, it's a huge, event, a lot of ambiguity there. I get it. But we've all seen the video. Is that video faked? Give me a break. So this is my, view of it. It was an attempt to maintain Trump in office. It was buffoonish as hell. It conceivably could have worked. It had a 95% failure rate. And when it did fail, Donald Trump could have fallen on his sword. He could have been destroyed by the Republican Party. They could have ended him by voting for impeachment. But instead, they went along with his broken kettle logic of these are fine patriots, they did nothing wrong, but also they were right. And it was a tourist event. They were let in. Nothing happened, but they were also, the election was stolen, and these people were trying to save the country. So they basically went along with the broken kettle logic, and here we are today where J6 is a hyper polarized event, and I don't think it's something that you can really get real about. You can't look at it straight and try to analyze what it was. So anyway, there is my opening statement, and I will hear it from the crowd, I guess. So I'll let some people up. And Andy, you can go first, since you're the first one there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you said a lot of interesting things. I think, I don't agree 100%, but I think you raised some really interesting points, particularly about the kind of the hypocrisy of wanting to call it this patriotic day and yet still trying to blame Antifa or blame, whoever they're trying to blame.
Mm-hmm.
I think the two most interesting parts of this for me is kind of seeing almost a mass hysteria reaction from both sides, whether you're in support of J6 or think that it was the gravest day in American history. And the other really interesting part to me is it's become it's become a religious holiday for both sides.
Yeah.
People get more excited about January 6th than they do about Christmas, which I think is extremely unhealthy. But it's curious that 3 years in and people still have nearly the same rhetoric. My position has changed quite drastically on this. Originally I thought all these people were completely innocent, and that Trump should have been in office and blah blah blah. And now I'm kind of more in the middle. I think that the J6 people were committing crimes by entering the Capitol, breaking windows, and all of that. But I think the radical left, or whatever you want to call them, they take it a little bit too far as well, and wanting to sentence everyone for sedition to commit. I don't know what the exact charge is, sedition or whatever.
Well, sedition, that's the highest charge, and I believe that has been applied to two people, Enrico Terrio of the Proud Boys and what is his name? Stuart Rhodes or Philip Rhodes, I can't remember, of the Oath Keepers.
Stuart
Rhodes. So two people have been convicted of just outright sedition. I would say this though. I've said this before, and I stand by it. I think it would have been a power move by Joe Biden to pardon many of the people who simply did get out of hand, and like the guy with the buffalo head, the QAnon shaman, the guy carrying the podium. I mean, I think it actually would have been a power move to basically say, listen, you have to be punished in some way, but you were in a way a victim as much as a perpetrator, in the sense that you were, gobbed up on QAnon rhetoric and Donald Trump Stop the Steal stuff, and we're just going to take a mulligan on this and kind of bring people together. I think that would have been fair. Now, you can't do that for people who really committed crimes, just obvious crimes, but I do think that would have been a power move. And, Biden's, telling everyone that he's going to protect the country from MAGA extremism when he's giving a green light to Israel to like ethnically displace a population. And it's just like, listen, man, I can't take this seriously anymore. And
the shaman, his name's Jacob Chansley, yes. I think he's actually a good symbol for this, because I mean, if you just listen to him, it's clear he has some sort of, I'm not making
Right.
diagnosis of him, but he has something wrong with him,
Right.
and
Believe it or not,
that kind of is a
don't
good
let his
symbol for this.
looks fool you. Like he is in fact a bit nuts. Okay, sorry. I'm
No, it's
also
very true.
A bit.
Correct.
That's
He's also
charitable.
disappointed, which is deeply American.
yes, yes. Um so yeah, I just I don't know what to say. Um again, I think, okay, this is actually what another criticism that I was going to make of the left. So this is another thing that bothered me. So there are people, they engaged in criminal trespass. They might have even stolen something or vandalized. Okay, that's a no-brainer. That's an obvious crime, right? Um, but what I've noticed is they've gone after the leaders of these quasi militia groups like the Plowboys and the Oath Keepers. Jack Smith has obviously gone after Donald Trump in a deadly serious way. And they've rounded up the QAnon shaman. He spent some time in the slammer. So did the guy who carried, I think, the guy who carried the lectern. People have spent time in the slammer. What they haven't done is go after the middle management of the event. So Ali Alexander is walking around, from what I can tell. Now, did he, collaborate with law enforcement? And is this a deal? I don't know. We have reason to believe that. Clarence Thomas's wife, Jenny Thomas, was obviously hugely involved in this. Women for America First, or Women for Trump, were involved in securing areas. Like, they seem to have gone after the yahoos, who granted should be punished in some way. And they have really gone after leaders of any sort of group that is a kind of quasi militia. And I also understand that. But they haven't really made the middle class people pay. And I think they should pay more, in my opinion. The Creamer mother and daughter, like, there was a lot of middle management involved in J6. And these people seem to have gotten off scot-free. They're in fact still operating in the conservative movement. And the guy who is like deranged and carried a Confederate flag to the Capitol, I mean, it's like, let's throw him in the jail, under the jail. In fact, that guy was as much as a victim as anyone. He was as much as a victim as he was a criminal. And I think there should be much more understanding shown. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, gay patriots, is that? Yeah, gay partisan, excuse me. I know you're gay. Whether you're a patriot or a partisan, we're not sure. But
I'm both. Don't jump to conclusions.
Yeah, I'm both. Yeah, I'm all three. But can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'll try to keep this brief, but I have a lot to say.
Okay.
I live in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
January 6th happened in, like, literally our backyard. And honestly, anyone who defends these buffoons who came all the... Like, I think only one person was a D.C. resident, but everybody else was, like, from, I don't know, California and Texas.
Sure.
And they came to Washington with the intent purpose of, overthrowing the election. Even Trump on his Twitter account. Come on, we'll see you January 6th. It will be wild,
Yes.
And yeah, like, I think it was planned. I legit think, like, people, like, I read somewhere that people use their COVID relief money to book other people hotel rooms here in DC. And
wow, I hadn't heard that. It's interesting.
If you Google it, I could be wrong though.
Yeah. So the government funded it in a weird way.
Yeah, that point, yeah, like, you were right about, like, the whole, those people were like undercover Antifa feds who are also at the same time patriotic people that need to be pardoned. I'm like, dude, which one is which? Which is it? Yeah. No, but they're like traitors, and I don't agree with you on the whole pardon thing. I think they should rot in jail. Uh,
Well,
because okay, go on. Sorry.
don't descend into that will to punish. I think it derives from self-righteousness. Like, who are you?
I see your
Could I
point.
Are
come in
you
there,
not?
Richard? Is that okay?
I have no idea who you
So,
are, but I know that I am deserving of punishment in many ways. So who am I to really say that, like, the dude who carried the lectern should rot in jail or something? Like, I don't like this instinct people have. It derives from self righteousness, and I actually really oppose it, to be honest.
I hear your point, but the thing is, like you didn't. So I mean, you
Yeah, right.
had
I was
views
not.
that
I
people.
was. I was in
Yeah, I
Montana
know.
during J6. Needless to say, if anyone punishes me for J6, that's unjust. But
No,
I'm talking
that
about just
it will
like,
be. Yeah, no, like the people who actually
yeah,
physically participated in that event.
yeah,
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you need to understand, like, I'm a forgiving person. Like people make mistakes. I get that.
yeah,
But it wasn't like on the spur of the moment. People actually came from all over the country, like I said, to Washington D.C. just to go through the. And by the way, the Capitol was literally closed due to COVID. You can't go anywhere even near at the time, so there wasn't tourism or anything. Whatever they tried to justify.
right.
I remember that one lady who chartered a private jet from Texas to
Oh yes,
Washington
Jenna
D.C. just to
Ryan.
watch. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but it's because it's all about economic anxiety, whatever, right? Yeah, yeah, / sarcasm. Um, but yeah, it's just like okay, people were upset. I don't know, because, like when Trump was elected, I remember I was in New York City, and when it was inaugurated, no, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when he was elected. When he was inaugurated, I was in New York City. I remember the Women's March. There was a Women's March there. I was in Midtown at a hotel. Forget the name of the hotel. Anyway, yeah, didn't see any Hillary supporter going to DC or whatever. And the thing is about that, it's like, oh my God, where was I going with this? I was taking down. No, oh, there's one thing
Okay,
I
real
wanted to
quick, because
say.
you're kind of
Actually,
rambling here, my friend.
really quick. Yeah, I know. I'm well aware. I'm gonna close
Okay,
this right now. Ashley Babbitt.
yeah.
She should have complied. I know, like she was going through financial troubles. I get that. I've been there before. But she drove all the way from, I don't know, San Diego
Something like that. Yeah.
to Washington, D.C. Yeah, to Washington, D.C. And she said that she was like a twice Obama voter. And then she felt the QAnon thing. Like, the only thing I don't understand, how do people believe that crap anyway? So I'll just end with that and I'll yield the
Okay,
floor. I think for me
Ace,
talk.
you're up first, and then I'll go to Sir Mayor. Ace.
Thank you. Just real quick, how would you relate this to the revolution of 1848?
Oh, in Europe?
Yes.
Um. Oh, wow. I've never thought of it that way. Interesting comparison. Um,
Is there like a Wagner-esque figure? I mean,
Wagner
somewhat
has fake.
close. Any
Yeah,
any
Wagner himself was involved in the Dresden uprising. I mean, he was quite a guy.
is he an insurrectionist?
Yes, in a way. I mean, he the thing is, unlike conservative, Wagner would totally adopt the title of, global criminal insurrectionist revolutionary. I mean, he would be like, you're letting me off easy on this charge. Like, I'm even more radical. Like that's the attitude Wagner would have. The attitude conservatives have is like, we know not what we do, and that, to be honest, that strikes me as rather dishonorable. But I don't know. I've never thought of it in 1848. I mean, were you fishing for something? Do you have a comparison there?
No, I don't. But yeah, like the to shoehorn in the Wagner thing. Yeah, if that was
Ah, I see.
kind of a
There were a
they're kind
number
of beyond
of, I mean,
political influence.
1848 is 1848-49, I guess we should say. It's famous for birthing the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, and which, I'm not a Marx scholar, but supposedly he was almost like pushed to write that, and he never really considered it his best work. That would be Capital or some other things. But Wagner took part. It was a kind of like, whether you think that's left wing or right wing is kind of curious. You've got Karl Marx and Richard Wagner involved in the same revolution. So it's pretty interesting. You could say it's like proto-Nazi or proto-commie and be justified in either way. There is a slow collapsing legitimacy of the current order, and ultimately, derived from Westphalia, post-Napoleon, etc. And there was a kind of spontaneous, organic revolt in these ways. It's interesting. I don't know what the right comparison is. I mean, in some ways, it was political, and it was an attempt to remain in power. And so I think a better comparison might be not the 1933 seizure of power via parliamentary means, but the 1923 beer hall putsch that Hitler and Ludendorff, et cetera, were involved in. And remember, very similar in the sense that too was treated as buffoonish and absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Ludendorff never showed up. It was just a debacle, basically. And I think that's very similar to, Trump not showing up to his own revolution. I think that's probably the best comparison.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay. Sir Mayor. You have your hand up. Sir Mayor. Or I'm probably mispronouncing.
What's up, Richard? Hey. No, it's Sir Major.
Oh,
Sir
okay.
Major.
Sir Major.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, good. It's a pleasure to speak to you, I'd say.
Good.
Just a little bit about me. I'm a BLM activist.
Okay.
Not to be confused with the national BLM group. I believe that in a sense that Black Lives Matter. I don't necessarily agree with I don't agree at all with the national group.
Okay.
And so we'll be clear with that. A couple things. I've got mixed feelings about this whole January 6th thing, to be honest. I believe that those who stormed the Capitol, those who broke windows and vandalism and committed blatant crimes should pay the ultimate price, because that is criminal, right?
Well, not the ultimate
I
price.
think
Let's say I don't think they should be.
I was just going to say, the death penalty.
No,
I do see Charles is in here listening. He would come up and say they should.
I don't think you meant that. I was kind of joking, to be honest. I understand.
Yeah. They need to be held accountable, is what I'm saying. Criminally, right? Now, and also civilly. But then also there were folks who were set up and framed, I believe. Like, for example, as a BLM activist, one thing that I look for is COINTELPRO. Do you know what that is?
Remind me,
Richard.
I've heard this.
COINTELPRO is a program created by the FBI specifically, and that program it stands for Counterintelligence Program, which means that the government, the FBI, will send provocateurs, agent provocateurs from the FBI. They'll send you FBI informants and try to get you to do things that you necessarily did not plan or did not ordinarily have planned, right? But if they can convince you to do it and you agree to it, just agreeing to it is conspiracy. Taking the act is another thing.
Right.
They would also send undercover FBI agents to infiltrate spaces, right? When we say spaces, we're talking about organizations, meetings, protests, and things
or
of that
Twitter
nature.
Spaces, for that matter.
Or even Twitter Spaces, absolutely, right? And that is documented that the FBI has done that. So with that said, right, I'm trained to spot people who don't belong. You guys, whoever did the January 6th, y'all should have partnered up with a couple black folks, because we could have told you who's the ops, right?
Sure.
So with right, like the Ali Alexander, first of all, he's not black.
Hold on. Don't interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. Alexander is not black. Okay, that's an immigrant who had no business even taking part of such event. Right.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it a buck. I respect a foundational white American, people like Spencer. Right. I will much rather sit down and talk to a white supremacist or a person who is a foundational white American, because we can agree on some things, right? We can go, if folks want to be racist, fine, you can be racist at the end of the day, but let's come together on protecting America and America's interests, and then we can go back to hating each other, right?
Yeah.
That's an option. But here's another thing.
Your terms are
Imagine, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, imagine if Black Lives Matter had planned the Stop the Steal event. We would have been charged with conspiracy for just planning it. Okay. Now, imagine if Black Lives Matter was out there on January 6th. To storm that Capitol in that fashion and in that manner, we would have been sniped. You understand that? We would have been murdered on sight, justifiably so. I think anyone who storms a government building for the purpose of causing harm and or violence, you should be dealt with accordingly. Now,
okay, now hold on
said,
real quick. Let me interject a little bit here. I tend to agree with you, but someone who would disagree with you would probably say that BLM was getting totally out of hand up to the point of, in Seattle, taking over a neighborhood for a time, and the police basically looked the other way. Now, I do think that there were fundamental differences, and this is the difference, is that BLM, it had a lot of goodwill support, and it was it was treated as about a real crime and a police abuse, and there's a lot of good feeling revolving around it. And outside of that Seattle situation, I didn't hear BLM. If the worst they did was kind of crime and mayhem, and that is extremely bad, but they never claimed that they're taking over a government building. And this is the thing with J6, is that they did say, we are not leaving here until Donald Trump remains in office. So even if they were less violent than a BLM rally, a potential BLM rally where more people were kicked and shoved, etc., they already kind of elevated what they were doing to another level where you are, for lack of a better term, really fucking with the government. It's one thing to go and shoplift or something. It's another thing to try to take over your local post office. Now, arguably, they're both just kind of petty, but one has this idealistic impulse of, taking over a government building. The other one is merely a crime. And I think this is another thing where conservatives just don't seem to get that, where they're like, oh yeah, well, some people were pushed and shoved and one guy hit a cop, but it wasn't as bad as this or that. It's kind of whataboutism. And it's
a better analogy would be this,
go ahead,
Richard.
Yeah.
There's one thing to go into a store and shoplift. It's another thing to go in there in a group and run in the store and then run out with items. Okay, fine. It happens. It's another thing that if there are security guards standing outside of the door saying that you guys cannot come in here, and you're here in mass numbers, okay, now you're elevating the threat because it's how many people that there are of you, right? It's not just like this is one or two guys. This was a group of thousands of people assaulting and violently harming security officers and or police officers. And they're beating police officers prior to their entry. They're forcing their way in there. And then on top of that, once they do get in there, they're not just going in there to shoplift or going in there to protest and saying, we shall not be moved. They're saying, where's Mike Pence? Where is that bitch Nancy Pelosi? They're going in there and they say they're going in there to kill such and such. Those statements were made. There was a guillotine outside on the property. Occupy space. They assaulted cops. They used fire extinguishers. People died as a result of January 6th, and that's not even up for debate. At the end of the
That's
day,
a lie.
this was that is not a lie. this was a
That's
violent
not a
mob.
lie. I mean, sorry, but if you die of a heart attack the next day that you were defending the Capitol, I mean, look, you're a casualty of that event. I mean, it's not, you didn't just so happen to have a heart attack. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I'll say is this, Richard. The last thing I'll say is this. I also believe that there were people that were there who should not have been criminally charged. What do I mean by that? Well, we saw police officers waving people through the gates. We saw police officers opening up the gates and saying, come on in, right? We saw people peacefully being escorted around the Capitol. Now, anyone that made it inside the Capitol knew goddamn well they should have been in there. Like it was already stated on stage that it was COVID. No one was supposed to be there. It was closed to the public, right? So that argument has been properly made, and I love that. But to the police officers who were waving folks in, either the police officers should be criminally charged with felonies or federal offenses, or those who went through the gate as a result of the police officers waving them in, they should not be criminally charged. And then also, Mike Epps or Ray Epps, where the fuck is he and why hasn't he been criminally charged? I'll land there.
Okay. I'll say you made many good points, and I appreciate them. I'll save the Ray Epps thing. I actually imagine that one of these J6 defenders is going to pick up the Ray Epps issue. All right, so I am going to go to Clown World Destroyer.
What's up, Richard? I just want to push back a little bit on a couple things that Sir Major said, just because I think they're ridiculous. He said that BLM would have been sniped if they were doing the same thing. Well, they actually did do the same thing, and they tried to burn down a church right near not the Capitol, but the White House. And nobody was charged for that, and they didn't get in trouble, and they weren't sniped. All over, let's say Minnesota, for instance. When they burned down that city and many other cities around the country, yeah, they didn't get sniped there either. So, Sir Major, your hyperbolic nature has gotten the best of you when you're talking about such things. I would just push back on that a little, and I say that you're either lying
Yeah,
because you don't know what you're
you
talking
need to
about, or you're just willfully lying.
Clown. You need to be respectful because Sir Major, he's a guy who probably disagrees with me to a great degree, and he's come in here. He's been respectful to you. He's been respectful to me. So he was not out of control, shouting or anything. So you need to show some respect.
Am I out of control or shouting?
No, you're not. You're not. But you're kind of getting there. That's why I interjected.
Okay, I get it. So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to push back on those things just because I think they're very hyperbolic, and I think they're, like just not accurate at all.
Is there anything directly comparable from the BLM? Did BLM destroy? This isn't a gotcha or anything. Did BLM vandalize or burn or anything? Any federal buildings during their protests? I don't know.
Absolutely, they did in Seattle. They actually hurt a lot of agents and stuff like that, hurling Molotov cocktails and other large objects and trying to actually hurt them. Yes, this did happen. Yeah.
May I do a rebuttal?
Yes,
please?
you can rebut that. Yes.
All right. So, we have to be intellectually honest when we have these conversations. Let's be clear. Let's be abundantly clear. Black Lives Matter, Black folks, Black protesters, Black organizers never burned down any building during our protests. What you may have had is people using the banner or the idea of Black Lives Matter, right? And white folks, we're talking about your Antifa folks, going to certain cities and you're using our movement calls to cause some sort of destruction, right? Black Lives Matter, and you won't be able to prove it, but if you could, I'd love to read these articles.
I was in LA. There were a bunch of
couldn't people that are in favor of the actions on January 6th make the same arguments for Donald Trump, though? Like, people under the banner of Trump did these things, but they
I disagree.
Weren't acting at his behest.
I disagree because we saw plenty of Trump supporters there. People were doing actual interviews saying that they're for Trump and why they were there. There were so many different red MAGA hats and Trump signs there. So people,
but the Black Lives Matter, they were saying they were there for Black Lives Matter and stuff too.
Well, Trump
I think it's analogous.
Trump actually spoke at a rally, and many of his supporters were there, and he gave the directive, "We're going down to the Capitol. I'll meet you there," and then he set those folks up. And I also think, Richard, I think that people who was there as a directive of Trump, who believed that they were fighting for their country, who believed that their commander in chief gave them some sort of instruction and that they were doing it for the good of the country or at his direction. I think that those people who make a viable argument should be forgiven. I think that Trump should be held liable for at least the civil damages as a result of that.
This is woefully inaccurate. A lot of people actually made their way towards the Capitol before he even stopped speaking, so none of them would have even heard him say that. So this, which points to something bigger, in my opinion, when it comes to January 6th, is it really, somebody else, kind of pushing the buttons around there? Because in my
Well,
opinion, it looks.
clown. I mean, look,
Hold on
there
a
was
second.
a.
Hold on a
Okay,
second.
you can finish, and then I'll
Yeah,
respond. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I know you're going to push back, Richard, and that's why I appreciate you.
Hmm.
So here's my 2 cents. Um, there's less security on staff that day than should probably be for, what they think is going to be 1 million people there at a rally, and they think nothing of it. It just doesn't make any sense. That's the first thing. The second thing is there were a lot of people that day moving towards the Capitol way before his, speech was even done because it was woefully boring. And that's just the fact. So like, I think that, what you saw on TV, Sir Major, is completely different from the actual reality, and I'm pushing back on it.
Okay. I mean, there was a rally, a speakers rally on the night before of January 5th. And there was hot and heavy discussion about what did Rudy Giuliani say, one-on-one combat or something like this before Donald Trump's speech. Secondly, one of the remarkable things about this event is that everyone was live streaming themselves and listening to Twitter or reading Twitter and listening to other people's live streams while it was happening. So even if you say that they started marching there before Donald Trump finished the speech, I mean, did they start marching before he said we're going to go arm in arm down Pennsylvania Avenue in that speech? But I don't know. But it's like they could have very easily been listening to it on their phone, or news travels fast in these crowds. So I just don't buy this notion that like the storming of the Capitol and Donald Trump's rip roaring speech were disconnected or something or coincidental. I just cannot buy that at all.
I would actually say that a lot of it was disjointed and disconnected if you actually saw what happened, sure. Everybody would like to make it an amalgamation or a coup, but it looked anything but. And if, in reality, if it was a coup, I mean, you have a bunch of, so-called Republicans there who love their guns and love their God and love their country, and they had no guns there, no weapons. I mean, come on, dude. That's not a
That
coup,
is
dude.
not true. I mean, first off, there were people inside the Capitol. There's the zip tie guys. And look, that you don't just carry around zip ties. I mean, that is a policing military instrument. Now, just because something was half assed and you didn't have like a full on Juan Perón figure putting traitors up against the wall and shooting them en masse, doesn't mean that it wasn't a coup. And I mean, as I've said in the title of this, it's tongue in cheek, but it's also very serious. This was a buffoonish, half assed, and ultimately insulting coup, but it was a coup. Secondly, in the J6 committee, there was all of this discussion of the what was it, the metal detectors or gun detectors detecting weapons all over the place. Now, maybe I don't even know the exact people who went into the Capitol didn't have weapons. I mean, I don't know what you're saying, but like there is evidence that was given to us by the J6 committee that there were weapons all over the place.
If that happened, wouldn't that be front page news? Wouldn't they want to make them pariahs?
Well, I don't know. That's not really an argument. I mean,
It just
the
doesn't make any
question is
sense.
whether
It
it's
doesn't
true
make
or
any
not.
sense to me, Richard. That's all.
Well, yeah. I mean, what? Look, there would we have video of someone apparently planting bombs in DNC and RNC headquarters. Now, I don't even know what to make of that, to be honest. Now, was that really deadly serious and a horrible thing? Was this a joke? Was it? I don't know. But I don't like you can't just disconnect all of these things. Like the speech is connected with Eastman's legal theory. Eastman's legal theory is connected to QAnon. QAnon is connected to the shaman buffoonish attack on the Capitol. It's all one thing, and there are many aspects to it. And I think each of those aspects should be kind of weighed, and you should be skeptical of them, etc. But to think that these things weren't connected, I can't go there.
Richard, could I say something? Because I've just had my hand up for a
Yes,
while.
yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just to quickly bat off that point, this is my main point, but just to bat off that, I think the overall disorganization in the effort that you're referring to here reflects the overall disorganization that was among the right at the time,
Yeah,
um, and still exists, right? To a large degree, and I think that if if the screws or configuration was a bit tighter in the months and years leading up to the event, I think the event would have gone a lot differently. That doesn't mean that there wasn't some intention there. I largely agree with you that, listen, if this was Dick Cheney behind this, it would be a Scooter Libby kind of character that would be orchestrating it. And I think the whatever whoever is the Trump equivalent of that, perhaps you could tell me, that's what it just kind of feels like here. I do agree with you. I think it was to elongate Trump's time in office, but
yeah.
I think that was the long shot aim. I think the more immediate aim was to show that, look, we can wield this club at any one time to send a message into the future for attorney generals and the like all across the land to kind of offset or push back against a lot of these lawsuits and stuff that have come in the time since. In my opinion, I think it was more about that. I think it was like, listen, don't go there. We'll make your life hell because we can wield this kind of power. And then sort of downstream from that, that's why I don't believe in extreme punitive measures to sort of punish people like the Lectern guy or the QAnon shaman, because I honestly don't think they even knew what they were being used for, basically, you know? Um, I mean, we don't even know who QAnon is still and what's really behind that. And that's just one
Right.
example. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just kind of my perspective. Well, obviously I'm an outsider, I'm not an American, I don't mean to impose,
No,
but
no,
you know,
we welcome outside perspective. Sometimes you have to be outside of it to really get at the heart of things.
yeah.
Let me hear from reformed user,
Okay,
and
can you hear me right
go ahead.
now?
Yes, we
So
can.
I wanted to make a comment. I think, like, some people would see this coup as illegitimate, and I'm not saying that I support Trump, but I think that a coup, whether it's violent or not, is the only possible way Trump could ever return to office because of the demographics in this country. I read a book by Sam Francis a while ago. I don't remember the title, but it was about how our racial demographic changes from immigration and also from fertility are overwhelmingly favoring the Democratic Party. White Euro Americans are the only group that vote majority Republican. Every other race always vote majority Democratic. So I don't think that Trump could possibly win in an election ever again. I think the only possible way that he'll ever return to power is through a coup.
Okay, that is pretty bold stuff. I would say, just to address what you said, I don't, in fact, agree with you in the sense that Trump could never win an election. In fact, I think Trump might very well win the upcoming election in 2024. And in fact, if I had to put money on it, I think he will. There's also a interesting polling, fascinating polling of blacks kind of moving towards Trump. Now, obviously, overwhelming amount of, if 20% of blacks vote for Trump, I think that would be a kind of revelation. But I think something like that might happen. Certainly, let's say, I don't know, 50-50 with black men. I think that's possible. Hispanics, a different population, they are leaning towards Trump in a remarkable way. So I kind of don't agree with you. I don't agree with this notion that I have heard throughout my career that populism or Republican Party or something is doomed without whites. I think that's might just simply be empirically incorrect. Uh, but okay, let me go to Philippe Souza.
Hello, Richard. It's the first time talking to you, so pleasure. And I'll just first off, would you vote for Trump this time round? Because I know you voted for Biden, mind-blowingly.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll think about it. I voted Montana, so it doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot. I don't think my vote will matter, at least on that level. Um, I don't know, to be honest. I'll kind of make that determination in the
I
summer who
thought
I'm going to
You're
actually
not
vote.
you're not going to join in writing in Dusty Devers with me, Richard?
Dusty Devers for lifetime
I thought you were
dictator,
going full
Pontifex Maximus.
Democrat retard, but I'm glad that you're coming back to us.
Okay, I've Biden's really disappointed me with the Israel stuff. So
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, I think the first 3 years of his admin were pretty good. Actually, I think he was getting kind of demonized by Republicans, but I look, he's really disappointed me. But there
Yeah,
it
I
is.
don't think that it's him doing anything. I don't think he can even figure out where he is, mate. But yeah, But I was gonna say it's fascinating how black people find a way to be victims of everything, even when they're not even involved. But moving on, I think that
All
it's
right.
quite obvious that there was feds involved. There was videos of guys saying we have to go in the Capitol before. I mean, I think that the right is just so naive, so retarded in a way that they cannot fathom how Machiavellian the left can be. And I think that they baited them into hazard epically. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Look. Okay. To be fair here, the Governor Whitmer kidnapping event. That was an example, from what I can tell, and these are court documents, in fact, and it's not even my theory, is that they were kind of baited. You have some lunatic people, and the feds start communicating with them, and then next thing you
Yeah, how
know,
easy it is to bait QAnon retards. I mean, we saw it.
yes, exactly. And so I'm not going to claim that this didn't happen, and I'm not going to claim that something like what you're describing wasn't involved. I think it would be just unbelievable to say that there weren't FBI agents all over the place on January 6th. They had infiltrated these groups, even the militia type, especially I would say the militia type groups.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
am
say, where if it was a coup, where are the militias? Where's the leader? Where's the
Well, there were
demand?
the militias. They were buffoonish militias. They were the boomer
Okay.
oath keepers, and they were the Gen X millennial equally buffoonish Proud Boys.
What
Those are the
about the
militias.
someone mentioned this, the head of security of the White House was denied backup and all. This is very fishy stuff, man.
I agree, but doesn't that kind of point to Trump a bit?
I think that Trump doesn't have nowhere near as control as we would like to know. I mean, he got in there and he's like, "Whoa, I'm gonna clean the swamp," and then he gets there and the swamp just swallowed him and it was over his head. He had no idea how deep it was. That's what I think. He's naive.
Okay. Well, this gets to kind of a bigger point of mine, which is that the conservatives, I would say, just the right in general, they they tend to always think of themselves as deer in headlights, kind of hapless, innocent figures. And I think that's very interesting. It's like we know not what we do, seems to be the claim that they constantly make. And I don't know, like that might be true to some extent. I remember being
Don't
on a
you think that
space.
stems from the white people culture? Us Europeans, we developed a truth before face culture and very high trust, and and that's how the enemy was able to infiltrate. You know this. How do you
Well,
think
I
the Jew?
understand that, but this isn't exactly high trust. This is almost like promoting your own innocence, kind of self-servingly
They
naive.
naively trusted Trump, and he didn't know what he was doing. He betrayed
I
his
think
own people.
that's
I agree with you.
fair.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous that he didn't back them. He abandoned them and let them go into the Capitol and let his own people get baited. I mean, he's a fucking retard for that.
I get it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move on. I'll go to my friend Obvious pretty soon, but I'm first going to go to PJ22 Dog. Um,
Hey,
hello.
hey, Richard, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I just I wanted to stop in to really say two things. The first is not anything that applies to what you mean by buffoonish or what I think you mean by buffoonish, based off everything you said. Because I mean, it sounds like you can, or from what you've said, you can still consider something to have serious meaning and also be kind of ridiculous, cartoon.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess the first thing I wanted to say was for people who meet it in some other way around this time of year, it's always a weird time of year for me looking at like leftist Twitter or leftist media in general, because there's like this simultaneous belief that, the people who were involved in January 6th were sort of these, toothless, feckless, unproductive rubes. Who were never any threat and could never have been any threat. And then in the same sentence, the same stream, if you watch like Vosh or something like that, you'll have it said that there was like a 50-50 fucking shot they were going to take over the United States of America. And it just, to me, it's always a little ironic to say both things, because even if you think these people are the equivalent of like, I don't know, like early anti-monarchist people in France or some shit like that. There's no way to like say that democracy almost ended and the people who did it, were nothing of any significance.
We're children. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't really like Vaush, but he can be kind of interesting and he's so bombastic and stuff. And it just gets to a point where he's like, Tucker Carlson, just an outright Nazi at this point or something. And it's like, listen, guy, it's a bit much. It's hysterical, in fact, and so you can't see straight when you're that like emotionally invested in something. But go on.
Yeah. Tucker Carlson is a Nazi and a chronic masturbator, and his IQ is under 50. But he's also a mastermind who is promoting white supremacy and going to take up the United States.
Right. It's
but yeah, the other thing I wanted to say was just kind of ask you a question of going off the premise, at least going off the polls or whatever the hell you want to look at, really, that seemed to suggest Trump might win despite all odds of history and whatnot. Like, how do you think 10 years down the line, 15 years, when we're actually writing history books, like how is January 6th going to be remembered if he wins?
This is a tremendous question. One thing I'd suggest is that remember how obsessed we were about COVID?
Yeah.
I actually think COVID is going to be memory hold, much like the Spanish flu was memory hold. I remember learning about the Spanish flu, I think in high school, and the teacher informed us that more people died of the Spanish flu than died in the First World War. And we were all like, what are you talking about? Like, that can't be right, you know? But it is right. Yeah. And it doesn't, something as random as a pandemic, it doesn't really quite fit a narrative. And so we just kind of erase it. I
And you
think
know
that,
what helped get people more killed was using cloths and throwing them away.
okay,
Ironically.
okay. I didn't. Yeah, let's not talk. Let's memory hole COVID. Actually, I would rather not talk about that. So look, this is what I would say is that I, obviously was extremely enthusiastic about Trump and thought that he was going to change the world against my own better judgment and stuff. But I own it. I was delusional and excited, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to go into it. Then I got very disappointed, and I thought it was all a joke. And probably at some point, I thought the Trump era would just be this momentary blip in our history. Looking back on it now, and where I am now, I think we live in the age of Trump.
Yeah.
Much like the early 2000s can be, you can just very correctly say this is the 9/11 era. This is you could maybe even say the Bush era. There's something in which everything relates to 9/11. Not Bush's election, but definitely Bush's presidency. The Iraq War relates to 9/11, obviously Afghanistan. Everything seems to revolve around that event. And that was like the 9/11 era. And I think we live in a Trump era where just everything is about Trump. He has been the most impactful, monumental human being of the past decade. And that is just remarkable. But I think I'm just being like, if we just simply dismiss him as, he's just a narcissistic reality show star who thought he could be president. If you just dismiss him, you're going to understand how impactful it is. So if Donald Trump wins, I think that will reflect how we understand J6. If Donald Trump, if the country descends into chaos, which I think is actually quite possible, and I'm trying not to be Vauchian and hysterical at this point, but I do think that is possible. J6 probably will be seen as like a first strike or a telling thing. Now, if Biden wins and then some basic bitch Republican wins after Biden and whatever, we might actually genuinely see it as a blip and kind of memory hole.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do think it's significant. I mean, I am kind of downplaying it by calling it buffoonish, but it would be wrong to think of it as insignificant. Just as it's wrong for these. It's like the left again. That what you were talking about earlier. That weird schizo kind of mentality where like Trump is so dumb and his hands are so small and. Yes. Melania has left him a month ago and he's just crying right now, or all this kind of fantasy that they engage in. And then on the other hand, he is Hitler and he's going to destroy everyone and kill us all or something. It demonstrates someone who just can't see straight. Like it's in between those things, obviously, and it's kind of different than both of those things as well. And you've got to try to see it by kind of pulling yourself out of it and not being so invested in it and try to see it clearly.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'll keep you up here, PJ. You had some good contributions. So I'm going to go to Obvious and then I will go to Jeff. Obvious, hello. Are you going to put a shrimp on to the Barbie for us?
No, bad place for a shrimp, Barbie. I'm sorry to say.
What? This is a myth that we all believe in? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, don't believe the commercials. You're welcome to put a what do you call shrimps over there? You call them shrimps.
Oh, we call them shrimp or prawns. Yeah, kinda, I think there's a distinction, but it's a whatever. Go on.
Yeah, it's tailor-made for the American audience, that advert in the 1980s. Anyway, yeah, this January 6th little bit of stuff you guys have been talking about the last hour or so. I just wanted to refresh my memory on the transcript of Trump's speech on that day. And there actually is a lot of pretty damning stuff here. Have you gone through it recently, Richard?
Not recently. I mean, yes. I mean, he declared that he was going to walk arm in arm with the protesters to the Capitol, and he was going to, inspire the senators to do what's right, and so on. So yeah, it was very clear that he wasn't just kind of riling up the crowd and or doing a typical Trump speech where he discusses Oprah and some fireman whom he met who was crying when he met him, and the fireman was just saying, "Sir, thank you for saving the country and my own life." Big, strong man who comes up to me, tears flowing down his face. Yes, it was not like that. It was something more.
Here's a little quote. It's a short one. It's an excerpt. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness, you have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors that have been lawfully slated. So this is pretty strong language, you have to admit. So yes. He goes on that he'll go down, walk. We've got to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down. So that always stuck in my head, Richard. What if he actually did walk down? Like, I know he's in a Secret Service bubble with all protection, but if he was serious about that, why did he walk down with them?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think from what we heard from J6, and I have to say, I am a bit skeptical of the girl who was working for Mark Meadows. I believe her name was Caitlin, or she was a Caitlin, so to speak. I am a little bit skeptical of her testimony, but she gave testimony that she heard from a Secret Service agent that Trump, tried to grab hold of the wheel of the car. And, I'll put a grain of salt in that, but I think it gets to the Trump's own ambivalence. Like, did he want to really do it? Because if you're going to really do it, you're going to have to really do it.
I believe
Trump went almost Jason Bourne on us.
Well, Mussolini famously was late to the March on Rome because he was making love with his mistress.
I mean, can we blame him, though?
Of course, you cannot blame him.
King, absolute Chad, yes.
But I believe if you go outside of that Secret Service protection, they won't have you back. Is that right? Is some unwritten rule or something like that? If he had left their protection, they'd leave him high and dry.
I doubt that. I think they would have. If you start going outside of their bubble, I would imagine the Secret Service will just manhandle you back into the bubble. I don't think they'll say that, oh, well, you're on your own now. I don't think they would do that now.
Yeah, right.
Trump almost grabbed the wheel by the pussy.
Exactly.
Fair enough. No, good guys. I'll relinquish the speaker role, but
all right. Yeah, thank you, Obvious. Enjoy. You crack open a Foster's for me, if you would. Jeff, you have the floor.
Hey, everyone. Happy New Year. I was listening to this from the mall, surrounded by 5- and 6-year-old kids, and I think I think
10-foot tall aliens, from what I've heard.
Probably, yeah,
yes.
But I agree with much of what I've heard. Richard, I think you and I are pretty much aligned. I want to make a couple of points. I mean, one, just to reference what you said about the age of politics. Ben Smith from BuzzFeed. He's very insightful media observer. He wrote an article, I don't know, in 2015 when Trump was first coming to power called Politics is Fandom. And I do think that it captured the age, and Trump has his own fandom, and that fandom, I think, has become a cult. And the second point I want to make is, after when January 6th happened, I had quit politics, Twitter, and alcohol in November 2020. I was like done with it. And so, I wasn't really involved in the 2020 election at all. I had done the Claremont Institute election war game, playing the intelligence community, which was innocent in form, but now I look back and I was like, what was the real motivation there? But that experience made me very, very sensitive to the peaceful transfer of power. And so after
Yeah.
January 6th happened, I was like, I'm just going to keep an open mind about this, and very independently concluded, Loot Walk sketchily wrote an op-ed on the Wall Street Journal the day after saying it's not a coup. But I came to the conclusion that it was a coup, definitely a coup in search of a strategy, and that the insurrection was actually a misnomer. And for those of you out there, not to sound, at the risk of sounding a little pedantic, and I think this is an important point, insurrections come from the bottom up, and coups come from the top down. And in a way, framing it as an insurrection abdicates responsibility from the top. Like, the insurrection was an instrument of a coup. The people who stormed the Capitol, that was part of a broader plan. And if you look at the fact pattern, I mean, Trump replaced people at the Pentagon, like Kash Patel and people like that. Like, that was super sketchy. Like, replacing people at the Pentagon, in the months before a potentially contested election. I mean, look, they were assuming that the left was rigging the game and trying to do that. And that's fair game within the legal system, right? But they, I think, went way beyond the legal system to looking for every little ploy that they could, undertake in order to, mess with the electoral results. And so, for me, it was, I concluded independently it was basically a coup, totally buffoonish coup. And then I was pretty black-pilled because all of these people who called themselves constitutional conservatives were like, cool. And I'm like, wow, this is so fake.
Yeah.
Like, this is just unbelievable to me that the GOP is going along with it. And then people like DeSantis were completely silent. And it's like, dude, like, either support him or be against him. Like, just, this is really pathetic. So anyway, and then I think that the top down point is important because, even though I think, it's nice that you caught up with me on the coup point, I do agree that you're one of your best tweets of the year was about crucifying Trump and metaphorically beheading him.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, because I feel all of these people who got caught up in it, a lot of, I love Trump supporters in the middle Americans, like, he led people off of a cliff. And, a lot of people got caught up in the Capitol thing. And some of those people were not good actors and deserved it, and so on and so forth. I mean, the DOJ did its job. But the prosecution definitely took place from the bottom up instead of from the top down. And almost think, like, in order to, and I've become not Republican, like, I'm supporting Biden this next election. And I have for the last few years. I'm pretty set on that. But I don't think the GOP is going to be whole again until he's metaphorically beheaded. There's like a whole Girardian interpretation of this,
Yeah, I get that. And they had a chance to do that, is the thing. The
Correct.
impeachment in January of 2021 was a chance to do that. And they seem to want to do it. Some of those phone calls or text messages from Kevin McCarthy where he was like, oh yeah, this is way too far. We're done with him, etc. And they just got kicked back in line. I think they're all just, I hate to go back to 2016. They're all a bunch of cucks. And they just get overwhelmed by Trump's dominant personality. And they can't kick him.
I think it's completely true. I think it's absolutely pathetic and pretty stunning. And it is cult-like. I mean, it is personality ahead of politics here. And the other thing I concluded in that period that I think is an important point as well is that, I kind of, another source of like sort of blackpilling on the right, or recasting from the whole 2015, 2016, which I too was a Trump supporter, obviously, but was when I realized America First was not American owned. The amount of foreign influence on the right that went into the Trump era. I mean, even it's very cynical. Like Bannon and Guo, like Trump is, the amount of a lot of our politics is corrupt. I get that.
Sure.
Potentially including the Biden family on some level. But the Trump is just the next level of corruption. And because the right doesn't trust the media and institutions, they're just wide open to be co-opted by all of these foreign influence narratives, and that drove a lot of it. And it's very cynical to me to see people yelling America first," knowing that that's derivative of a foreign influence campaign. It's very, very, very cynical. And so I
Russia,
think,
Russia, Russia.
well, yeah, I mean, Russia, China, all the, a bunch of other countries too. But yeah, Russia influence was real. I mean, Hillary also used as an information operation, so it's complicated. But the foreign influence is a very underreported story. I mean, look at Gal Luft, look at Guo Wenxi. There are a lot of examples in the right. I mean,
What
Bannon's a
about
whole
Israeli influence, mate?
Yeah, I mean, Gal Luft is a great example of it. He's Israeli, I believe, connected with the China, who was convicted by the DOJ. So I think there's influence from certain sectors in Israel, UAE, China, as well as Russia. So that's definitely been a factor. But I'm
Don't
not
you
obsessed.
think?
Epstein, maybe?
Epstein. Yeah, I mean, Epstein. That's a huge can of worms. Don't you think that what they want is just simply chaos? I mean, like, I don't, I don't even, I don't think Russia is going to take over the U.S. or something like this. But I think it's a kind of like, I pardon the stupid metaphor, but it's like the Cowboys are playing the. I was about to say the word that shall not be named, the good old Redskins, but they're playing Washington. If I could like inspire the girlfriend of the quarterback to dump him the night before the game, I would, because that I would just throw their whole team in chaos or whatever. It's not this like Manchurian Candidate, almost like 1950s fantasy of like the commies taking over. It's just this attempt to make our politics chaotic and for us to really lose touch with reality. I heard someone describing like Putin's propaganda. There's actually a very good documentary on this by Michael Curtis, where it's like old style propaganda would almost make it would tell you the opposite of what you're seeing. So, you've had a terrible harvest and you're, starving, but then they put up a poster that said, we've overfulfilled grain orders this year. Everything is wonderful. It's just this brutal, wrongness that's pushed in your face. But I think what's happening now, it's almost like this. You don't know what is true. Like it's
Yes,
like in that Obama movie, which I kind of liked, to be honest, Leave the World Behind, where it's like, who's doing this? Is it the Koreans? Is it Islam? Is it our own government? Like what's happening? And I think that's like a more powerful form of propaganda at the end of the day, just getting you to lose touch with reality. And it's something that's much easier as well, since social media kind of is our reality at this point. People are leaving their homes. They're staring at their phones. Yeah. But go on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very accurate statement. I mean, different countries have different goals. Certainly with Russia, I think the line of their propaganda with a kind of anti-hegemonic strategy has been to, sow discord, sow distrust. And if you're on their side, the key metric to look at is trust, declining in trust. And that's what we've seen in our societies. I think that's not solely the result of foreign influence. I think there are a lot of other
Don't you think
factors there.
that's what woke
But
is?
could you please not jump in there? Yeah, woke could be seen as a Chinese, partly fed by Chinese foreign influence. So different countries have different strategies. China's approach is more unrestricted warfare. How can we help divide, conquer America from within without even, doing stuff? So different countries have different goals. The one thing that I think is worth noting is that the geopolitical environment, and this is a really important point, if I do say so, for the whole Trump question, is the geopolitical environment today is very intense. I mean, there's some probability of, world war. I would say 10%, let's call it.
Sure.
And, we have conflict in Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East, and South China Sea is stuff too. So there are very, very meaningful geopolitical consequences to this election in a way that I don't think there were in 2016. And Trump is like dilly-dallying on NATO. Like, I think I think it's a very, very serious matter. And if you look at who our adversaries support, China and Russia both want Trump to win. Like, to me, that's an indication that, like, that's like not good.
Yeah.
So anyway,
And also,
all
Jeff,
this,
if
yeah, sorry, go
real
ahead.
quick, just to interject, if you want to prove what is very interesting is that if you want to prove how right wing and badass you are, you bash NATO. So I saw a headline of Vivek Ramaswamy saying, "Oh yeah, we might need to get out of NATO." Trump was saying this in 2015, and so there's just been this radical flip of from 20 years ago and certainly 60 years ago, where if you wanted to be the hardest core Republican, you would be like, we need to strengthen NATO, we're gonna invade the Soviet Union or whatever. That was kind of the Buckleyite, better dead than red, rhetoric. And now it's kind of the worst thing. I mean, it's reversed. Like, I don't think, obviously Vivek is not going to become president, and he's kind of grasping for straws. But it's, which straws is he grasping? He's not
100%.
grasping at I'm a good Cold Warrior. I believe in the Western Alliance, Atlantic Alliance. He's instead saying I want to tear it up, and that's why you should vote for me. It's
Yeah,
remarkable.
yeah, and I call that the Vivek problem, or the Tucker problem, can also be seen, where you have smart guys on the right, our generation, Gen X, millennials with elite educations, who are now embracing talking points that are derivative of foreign propaganda. And that's like the Vivek, I think, is the smartest, most compelling candidate in the GOP. And yet I don't like him. I don't agree with him. I think he's too like off range, going on Alex Jones and all that stuff. Tucker,
Yeah.
there are things I like. I want to like Tucker. There are things I like about him, but I think he's just become too derivative of these foreign kind of co-op. Like, that's what's very black pilling, is like when I see these smart guys of the right who are spewing out these talking points that at the end of the day are kind of downstream from foreign propaganda narratives. And I think you and I saw that, and on some level maybe experienced that personally, unwittingly or whatever,
Definitely.
in past eras. And so it's easier for us, people like us, maybe to see that, but it's a phenomenon. Anyway, with that, I'll let somebody else speak.
Actually, Jeff, I'd like
Yeah,
you to
good stuff.
expand a little bit. Sorry, Richard, I apologize.
Go ahead. Sure.
Jeff, I'd like you to expand a little bit on what narratives you're speaking about, because I'm interested in what you're talking about. What is basically downward of the I guess communist narrative that people are spewing on, right?
Yeah, so I would say here's what raises my antenna. So, for example, a lot of people are saying destroy the FBI, destroy the CIA. That's very different from saying we need more oversight or reform. Like, that is literally foreign propaganda aimed at creating more operating space for fuckery, right? And so that's an example of a narrative that Vivek has embraced that I think is downstream from foreign propaganda. A lot of the anti-NATO stuff is as well, in my opinion. The Ukraine conflict, I think there are some principled stands like against supporting. I support Ukraine. I'm pretty hardcore on that, as you guys could probably guess by my tone. But like, I think like Elbridge Colby makes really good points against it. But I also think like a lot of the anti-Ukraine stuff is like, I mean, a lot of, and then there are also like dopamine triggers where, because of botnets or whatever, people are rewarded for spewing these narratives. So there's a whole political economy of amplification of foreign influence narratives. And one thing I'm watching is the way spaces are being used this election. there's like a lot of the hosts of spaces are, can be sketchy. Like they're I love spaces. I think they're incredible, but they're also a vector for like foreign influence in certain ways. So anyway, I'm not obsessed with it. It's just something I'm maybe uniquely, it's just something I'm very conscious of on the right.
So,
Hope
Jeff,
that answers your question.
can I push back a little bit on that? Do you think that
Of
maybe
course.
perhaps the a lot of people have, seen what's happened around the country with these organizations and lost faith in them, and when put to task, or when I guess when they're actually under the microscope, they get no slaps on the wrist and they just say, be better. And what this tells, regular people around the country is, we can meddle in your, every day, and that's fine. But as soon as you meddle in ours, we're not going to do anything. Or as soon as we do something wrong, we're not going to do anything about it. I think it's left a bad taste in regular, folks' mouths. And yeah, it may be downstream from a narrative, from a different country, per se, but I wouldn't correlate the two and saying that this is because of this. I would say that maybe they have the same ideas. They came to the same idea, but for two different reasons. Obviously, one nefarious and one maybe not so nefarious.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. I mean, look, there's a very nuanced conversation to have. I just am alert to pattern recognition, and I'm conscious of these things in a way on the right. Just having written about this stuff and experienced it on some level, in hindsight. And what I would say is, like, first, people can arrive at views independently that are fine. The second thing I would make is converging. Just because your views are the same as foreign influence doesn't make you a bad actor, right? Just because I support Russia or somebody supports Trump and Russia
Wow.
supports Trump. No,
You
I don't
support
support.
Russia.
No, I
Mask
do not.
off.
It's recorded.
Uh-oh. No, I do not support Russia right now. My point is if somebody supports Trump, and then remember the campaign when everybody's like, well, Russia supports Trump. Well, that's convergence is not the same as collusion, right? So I don't think people can arrive at views independently, right? So the question though is what's sovereignty? What is sovereignty with your ideas? If you independently arrive at supporting Trump, independent of foreign influence, that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we kind of don't even realize that our views are downstream from these things. So it gets very complicated. And then let's pretend like I heard that, oh, Russia was supporting Trump, therefore I'm not going to support him. That's reflexive control, right? So my behavior could be controlled reflexively in the opposite direction. So it's a very complex issue, is what I'm trying to say. And I do believe and acknowledge people can arrive at views independently, for sure. But that's where, if you're a foreign influence people and you see woke, the embers of woke, you just go pour gasoline on it, right? To Richard's earlier point about chaos or amplification. And that's kind of what I see happening in the narrative terrain.
All right. I will be bringing this to a close very in a reasonable amount of time, maybe at 3:30 my time. So we'll do a good 2 hours here. But let me get some people who haven't spoken yet. So I will let up 3 more people. Okay, real quick, Sir Major, did you wanted to add? You've had your hand up for a while, and did you want to add something or? All right. Maybe you've stepped away from the phone.
So Major would never talk to me.
Mimi, you have a Smurf logo.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Hello.
I look forward to your commentary.
Yes, sir. I just really
Hello,
wanted
hello.
to go back
Oh,
into the
There he
conversation
is.
where they were talking about
Nice, Major.
black
We
men
got
voting
this.
Republican. Yes, that is abundantly correct. Black American men, foundational Black Americans, we are on this Trump boat, okay, or on the Trump plane. We have left the Democratic Party. We have left because we're tired of being lied to. We're tired of being duped, hoodwinked, if you will. and just told anything. We're tired of being told to vote blue no matter who. We're tired of falling for the same old okey doke. The Democratic Party has never done anything for Black Americans. They have not. And the only thing that they do is pacify us with quote unquote perceived Black leaders. Okay. So, for example, Barack Obama is not a Black American. He's a Kenyan American, right? He's not a descendant of American chattel slavery. His ancestors
Right.
were not enslaved here in America, right? So with that said, we're voting Trump because one beautiful thing about Trump is through all his downfalls and his shortcomings, Trump has lifted the veils of America up. He has shown us what's underneath the skirt, if you will, right? And he's shown America how double standard she is. He's shown how anti-Black and racist that she is. He's shown us how the Democratic Party is just as racist as the Republican Party, right? And so when we look at the harm that's been caused, you're talking about a president who said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. You're talking about a
Yeah.
vice president who locked up a bunch of Black men during her tenure as while in Congress and also as the Attorney General, right? We're talking about how she massively incarcerated Black men over marijuana, but then she got on the Breakfast Club, which is an urban radio station, and she got on that network and said how she smoked weed and listened to Tupac, right? She pretended to be a Black American woman, and Kamala Harris is not a Black American woman. Kamala Harris is an Indian American woman, okay? But she tricked us when she was stumping around with her Chucks and Pearls and the AKAs and her affiliation with the Black sorority groups. Kamala Harris is not a Black woman, okay? Her father is Jamaican, right? And there's they are delineating over there in Jamaica, right? Her mother is classified as white on paper. Her mother went back and changed her birth certificate. Okay, so Kamala Harris is not one of us. We are delineating in this season. We want white folks to know, white patriots to know, just because someone is melanated in America, they are not Black American. They are Nigerian American. They're Kenyan American. They're Caribbean American. They are not us. They have their ancestors did not go through what Black Americans went through. And then again, the reason why we're leaving is because we're tired of being lied to. We're tired of being tricked. At least President Trump had something for Black Americans. He had what's called the Platinum Plan. He did do the First Step Act. At least he signed on to it. It wasn't his creation, but he did sign on to it. And he is responsible for allowing a lot of Black men and women to get out. And so it is imperative that folks who are Black and those who are white, that we work together to save America. Now we're using the slogan. The last thing I wanted to say was this, right? Is I want my patriots in this space, if you truly love America and you truly are for this country, we have to stop. First of all, either we need to get strategic and come together for certain common cause, or B, we got to start learning how to work together. Because I remember a time, Richard, where Black Americans were saying, defund the police. And white America lost their minds. You're unpatriotic. How dare you? You're against cops. But now we hear people saying defund the FBI, which is very, very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the reason why people are saying defund the FBI, Black people been complaining about the FBI from when they were killing Black leaders like
Oh
Huey
yeah.
P. Newton, Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur, Dr. King, Malcolm X. So many Black leaders. The FBI has literally, in conjunction with local police departments and the CIA, they have killed our Black leaders. Okay. Now white Americans waking up and they're saying we need to defund the FBI. We need to defund them. We need to reallocate and all this other stuff. Black folks been saying that. Okay. We got to start working together. America won't be our country as we know it today, because now you're having the Democratic Party usher in this new class of folks, which is these immigrants. And they're only doing that because Black Americans are demanding reparations. Black Americans are starting to work with the other aisle, or the other aisle starting to work with Black America. So now we never thought that there'd be an opportunity where Sir Major Page, one of the most pro-Black guys out there, who's unapologetic, is sitting on a stage with Richard Spencer. And we're having conversations, and we're sitting in other spaces with J6ers and things like that. But what, just like the FBI did to J6, they've been doing to Black lives, or Black people, Black activists, Black liberators. So we got to learn to work together, and then also recognize that everybody ain't gonna make it, Richard. Everybody ain't gonna make it. This ain't for everybody, right? And so I would implore you, Richard, I just followed you. I want you to follow me back. I would love
I
to have
did.
more conversations. The only main thing that Black folks want today in America is we want reparations. And that's what we're fighting for. Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting that forth. To be honest, I'm kind of open to the idea of reparations, to be frank. It's just it's a real thing. It's a real wrong that you can put that's tangible. And I think that's just, in a way, a kind of better thing than endless welfare dependence, you could say, or diversity, which isn't even affirmative action as it was originally defined. It's as you say, it's diversity. DEI promotes a kind of new class of non-Americans or immigrants or et cetera. So I kind of get the reparations issue in a way that I didn't get it when 20 years ago, let's say. All right. I will go to Mimi with the Smurf avatar. I am terribly excited about what you have to say.
Thank you. Major, you did amazing. That's one of my friends. And oh Lord. Woo-wee.
You're all right. You're all right.
I just want to say, even when we talk about reparations, and Richard, you did it. Reparations is a stimulus check. Where's Fauci? If you look up the language, reparations, you'll see it's at default of the government and so on and so on. You don't have no time to be talking. I don't want none of us as Americans in 2024 to be talking about it. Even if you can't come over here and this world. I mean, you could talk about it, but be about it, but don't spread it, because
Okay,
I find
why
the
don't
reason
talk about
why,
it? Because of
here's the thing,
Fauci?
Richard. Here's
Okay.
the thing. I want you to
Yeah.
understand this. Hear me out. I'm talking directly to you, Richard.
Okay.
Imagine, and I'm 50. Imagine me sitting up here talking about reparations, right? And then all this information that's being at the touch of the thumb, the finger, or you have to go to that establishment, whether it's the courthouse, so it's Social Security Administration, or you got to go to get your passport or what have you. At this time in the world, if you don't know if you have lineage of that compensation, let it go. Because if you receive your reparations, where's it coming from? The government. So that means that you're on a dependency of income. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but if
Well,
the
yeah,
government
that's it.
wrong,
Because where are you
hold
going to
on, hold on,
receive
hold on,
reparations
hold on.
from? You're suing either the
Hold on. I
state
get.
or in
I'm
sick.
responding. I'm
Okay, go ahead.
responding.
Go for it. I'm sorry.
I mean, if the government wrongs you and they
It's
pay
no
you,
different than being on food stamps.
it's a reparation for a
But you
wrong. Like
still
if
receiving a check from the government,
well, I
right?
know, but like, is that the worst
Well,
thing
let
in the
me ask you
world? I mean,
something,
are you
Richard.
like a radical
Hold on. Let
libertarian
me
or
do it
something?
this
I mean,
way. Hold on,
A
Richard.
different question is why
Well,
were
hold
there
on.
COVID reparations but not slavery
Well,
reparations?
listen. No,
yeah.
it's no such thing as slavery. Listen, a lot of
All
Democrats
right,
forgot
take
about.
care, Richard. Bye.
Hold on. Because
Okay.
Jeff is coming in. Hold on. Let me
Okay.
make peace with this, because it was already a peace deal. It's called 1 mule and 40 acres, right? So imagine you winning the lottery, and it says you can get $5,000 a week, or you can drop. Which one are you going to do? Because you see the economy, I'm going to go ahead and get the WAP, because I don't know what's going to be. What you
The
going to do?
what?
You're going to take the $5,000 a week, and you're going to
The
depend on the
wallet, sir.
government. Because Nancy
Was it
Pelosi and
what was the
Biden and
choice?
Hunter
5,000 a
Biden, they don't
week
pay that.
or
They're going to
what?
fuck up your money, right?
$5,000 a week versus what?
Versus getting a drop. You know, the scratchy
What's a
tickets.
drop?
I'm talking about lottery. You know the tickets you can get. Like if you scratch off,
Yeah.
you get $5,000 a week, or you can drop out and it'll say like 1.7 million. Are you gonna go ahead and get the drop, or are you gonna go ahead and
Oh,
just
I see what you're saying.
right?
Well, you
Because
can kind of
the
make arguments
educational
both ways.
system
I
is
mean,
with the DOJ too. That's the ones that wanted the school education. The ones, you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to make it
okay.
make sense. I talk fast.
Okay.
Sir
Yeah,
Major,
yeah.
I'm coming in your
It-
space. You did amazing. I love to
Go off.
elevate. I love it.
okay.
But go ahead, answer my
Okay.
question, Richard.
All right.
Thank you.
You could kind of make arguments both ways. $5,000 a week sounds nice to me, but you could make the argument that if you have a project that you need that 1.7 mil in your example,
Oh, it
that
will
you
tell
actually
you
need
if
the
you
money
grab
now in
this, you
order to
can
put
get
it forward. But
the
yeah,
pool.
I would say that most people would eat the marshmallow as opposed to wait for 2 marshmallows.
Right, because
Okay.
especially when Biden is president, right?
Well, don't punch right.
Because they keep sending money to
Maybe.
Ukraine. I would take it out. I would go ahead and just jackpot.
Oh, to take it
Right.
away from Ukraine. Okay.
There's a lot of brothers in Ukraine.
I would just
Represent.
jackpot. I'm just talking about a quick little.
Okay.
I ain't getting a scratchy. Y'all know those scratchy where you just pay $5 and like $5,000
I've
every
never
week.
played the
You get what I'm
lottery.
saying? I'm just giving you an analogy of where I'm going with this.
I get it.
Very all up in there. But go ahead. You got to hit.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mimi. I'm going to take you off the speakers panel, but thank you for your contributions. Okay. What about this? I'll just go down the list and just kind of keep it brief. I'm ready to end this at 2 hours. So, El Snarkio.
Yes, hello, Richard.
Hey.
Always listen to your thing, so I guess I'm a fan. And I didn't expect you to call on me, so I'm just answering and saying I'm enjoying the conversation. What do you predict for the alt-right in 2024?
Let's go.
I don't predict much for the alt-right, or I guess they want to call themselves the dissident right. It is kind of a different formulation, a lot of similarities. I think so many things that the alt-right did uniquely in 2016 have now just been absorbed by mainstream conservatives. So I think in a way there's not a need for a dissident right, and they're not particularly dissident. So that's kind of how I think about this stuff.
I think space indicates. I think this space right here indicates a future alt-right where it's very diverse. There's many voices, male and female, for the first time. I'm enjoying that part. There's some black voices. Maybe there's some Muslim or Jew in here, and I think that's the future alt-right. You guys are all talking in harmony. So maybe this is it, but I wish you all the best. Thank you for letting me speak, Richard. All the best.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, I'll go first to some people who haven't talked. So White Pill.
Hey, what's up, Richard? I'm a foundational Black American. I'm also an octoroon. How do you feel about reparations for octoroons?
Well, I guess you'll get 1/8 of them.
That sounds fair to me, man. I appreciate you, bro.
Okay. Okay.
Fair enough.
I imagine that was a joke, so I went along with it. But Z, you've got the floor. Z. Okay. Badger, you've got the floor. Badger, going once, going twice.
Wait.
Badger,
Can you hear me?
please.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry about that. Okay. One of the callers touched on this. I just wanted to bring up like the federal government's response during like when the Capitol riot was going on. The sergeant at arms, I think his name was William Walker. He reports directly to the Speaker of the House at the time and the Pentagon. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of like when you look at January 6th and the way it played out and who was responsible ultimately for the National Guard being deployed and like the way the federal government's response was, it was quite suspect. So like I think it's really hyperbolic at this point, 3 years later, saying that this was all like it's a coup. It really wasn't. In fact, it obviously was like a bait situation.
Okay, so we'll go back to this. So what you're saying, there was someone who was in charge of deploying the National Guard. And they didn't.
Yeah, they were denied. The chief of police for the Capitol Police requested for hours for backup, and it kept being denied. And the official response is that,
well, it doesn't that indicate that it was a coup? I mean, that.
Well, no, because by coup you mean who's the leadership here in this coup? Is it Trump? Because Trump wasn't okay, yeah, but Trump wasn't in charge of the National Guard forces. It was Nancy Pelosi and the Speaker as the Speaker of the House, with the Sergeant at Arms and the Pentagon.
Well, okay.
Sorry,
Look,
I have to interject just really quick. The DC National Guard is at the behest of the Department of Defense and Secretary of the Army, to be specific. The mayor cannot call them the DC National Guard. It's the Department of Defense. It took like 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes to deploy the DC National Guard during the George Floyd protest, but on January 6th, it took them hours. But I want to just speak my mind. Sorry.
Well, so all I was just trying to add to the conversation was that, like, if you after the fact in court, it really seems that like it was a situation where, like, look, you have 15%. The federal government only has 15% approval in the United States. So, and then all the BLM people in this call, like, all this stuff matters because it adds up. It all added up to this response by the general population on January 6th. So to me, and I'm not like a full-on like Trump supporter anymore, but when you look at it objectively, it seems like a reaction to a population that's just tired of the government. And to call it a coup, it's not really organized like a coup.
That's called a background cause. Like that's how the term I would use. Like I agree that the population is fed up with the government, but you seem to just say that as a way of not talking about ways in which it was an attempt to maintain Trump in office and overturn the election. Jeff, you seem to want to jump on.
All right, thanks, Richard.
That one.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to add to that. Thank you. That it was organized. That's the thing. I mean, this was an organized effort. And I think Badger, I respect your point. And I can understand how people on the right feel like there was some level of entrapment with January 6th. However, if you look at the broader fact pattern, this was an organized attempt to change the electoral thing, and the insurrection was only one minor. January 6th was only one minor part of that, right?
So why didn't they prosecute the leadership and the people who organized?
Well, that's a great question, and that was my earlier point where I was saying one of the things I haven't liked about the way that it's been prosecuted is they've gone from the bottom up rather than the actual top, and that's why I think the only way we're going to really move past it is by metaphorically beheading Trump or getting a firm conviction of him. And if he is convicted, then he should be removed from the ballot of 2024. And personally, I think that would be the best thing that could happen to the GOP in the medium term.
The thing with January 6th and like following like the whole situation with the Floyd riots and everything is that you had a large portion of the population railing against the federal government, attacking U.S. cities. And then on the flip of a switch after J6, all of those people, the majority of those people now supported the federal government. You see? So it's all this big op. It seems like a big op. And like, I think it's so scattered and fragmented. Like they're never going to go after the leadership because they're not supposed to. And then Richard, I just want to say one last thing. You had mentioned weapons being in the Capitol. There's never been a person. Yeah. There's never been anybody who has faced charges for weapon possession. The only thing that you can say is that there was people in Virginia. That's why the Oath Keeper guys went to prison with weapons, and they were 100% organized.
Yeah, they had weapons in actually near a place where I lived in Roslyn, interestingly, many years ago, more than 10 years ago. But yeah. The evidence presented by the J6 committee was that these sensors were going off of weapons around the Capitol. I don't know if weapons were in the Capitol. I did not actually say that. I simply said that there were a tremendous amount of people armed, and that is significant.
Yeah.
But again, to go back to Jeff's point, I mean, I don't think if I don't think of J6 as a bunch of yahoos with guns who wanted to just go take over the government. I think that the Yahoo contingent was one aspect of an overall plan, and it was an important aspect, but it wasn't fully organic. Like it was about, let's use the yahoos, let's get them really excited and making all sorts of noise. We're going to encourage the senators to reject the vote, and we'll be, back in charge. I think that was the idea. I agree with Jeff and saying, you've got to go after the top guys. You also have to go after the middle people.
Well, the reason why they're going after regular people, Richard, is because that like this obviously was a planned thing to get dissidents to come out into public and then show that if you're
planned by
the
whom?
federal
Okay,
government, government, 100%. Look at the people they're putting in jail.
They know who the dissidents are. Like,
yeah. Well, the one last thing I wanted to mention was the more people frame January 6th, because facts don't matter, this. The more the media and like I'll use you as an example, like this space, the more that January 6th is framed as a coup, the more the average person, it just polarizes average people. Like the more it's set up, the more it's framed like this, like insurrection, the more regular people just don't care. They really don't. They either hate the left or they hate the right.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think there's so much self-righteousness, and that in a polarized environment, it just people just tune it out.
Yeah.
All
right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
it. Thank you, Badger. Z, you have the floor, and then we're gonna tie a bow on this one.
Yes. Hey, thank you, Richard. I've been listening for a long time, so I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak here. I just wanted to say, I think that January 6th, was in fact a coup, and I actually am a Trump voter and supporter, and I think it was a buffoonish, half-assed for sure, but maybe it is time for a Napoleonic leader. Maybe Trump should, command an empire. That's when Rome became legendary, when they abandoned the republic. So I think there are many Trump voters out there who, wouldn't mind Trump on the throne in D.C. and maybe.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I think this gets at the ambiguity where it's like, this was an alt-right thing back in 2016, but it continues now of, God, Emperor Trump, or in a QAnon theology like Messiah Trump.
There's this Napoleon quote. It's he who saves his country does not violate any law. So
yes,
that's how it would be written.
That's probably derived from the salvation of the people is the highest law, which is a principle of you cannot break the law in defense of a people in peril. In effect, basically, no holds are barred at some point. You can install a dictator, Cincinnatus. You can do whatever needs to be done, because there's no point in law unless you have a people and a state. And look, I don't disagree with you in the sense that perhaps we've reached the end of an era or a paradigm in my lifetime. And this might be a post-war paradigm, because there's been a number of different Americas. There is colonial America, there's frontier America, there's the Articles of Confederation America, there's pre-Civil War America, there's post-Civil War America, there's the New Deal America. We've had a lot of different American paradigms that last a number of generations. Perhaps there is a post-Cold War paradigm, a long-ranging one, that is just simply coming to an end. And I don't say that as an endorsement or a condemnation. I simply say that as an analyst, because there's nothing really I could do personally to stop this or to encourage it. It's just have we come to the end of something? And we have this like geriatric Joe Biden up there trying to kind of like bring back the 80s or something, and you just can't do it. And it's bound to fail, and it's kind of it's the tail end of a declining paradigm where people are just losing trust, losing faith. There's no kind of common value system. And yeah, maybe the answer is some sort of buffoonish, half-assed, insulting dictatorship by Trump. I mean, I don't know, but I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to contemplate that, because I do think that the country doesn't work on some level. I don't think we're all pulling in the same direction. And again, I say that not as an endorsement nor as a condemnation. It just is. So Jeff, I'll give you the last word on this, Jeff, because you'll probably say something more bright and reassuring than what I just said. So
well, maybe more reassuring. I'm not sure, brighter, but I think your analysis of the historicism and different phases of America, that was really well articulated. I also think that there's truth that, like, the GOP is cult-like, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that it's like a fascist movement at this point. Like, they are willing to support a guy who has expressed, who has demonstrably, tried to mess with the Constitution and continues to say that he will do that. Like, what do we call that? So, I'm not a pearl clutcher anti-fascist, but the right GOP is looking more and more like a literal, authoritarian fascist movement to me. I believe in Americanism. I believe in liberal democracy. I've kind of not come back to it because I've always been it, but I was very cynical and down on it. But if you look geopolitically and you zoom out, China right now, which, a few years ago was looking like, well, gee, maybe we should have authoritarian capitalism. No, it's a gerontocracy with digital surveillance. It's really messed up. It's really bad. If you look at Russia, that's like a kleptocracy. If you look at the rest of the world, it's like, third world, it's like, America is very flawed. The woke empire, so quote unquote, is pretty flawed. And yet it's also the kind of the best out there. And I want it to succeed. The question in my mind is it capable of reform and improvement? And I would argue that it is, and that your example of how America has rebooted time and time again is an optimistic case that, yeah, one thing we're good at is actually adapting and improving. Like, never bet against America. I mean, I've kind of come to this synthesis with, like, pro-Americanism, what was the saying, like, Americanism, fuck yeah, or whatever. It's like,
yes.
So I think if we look at it comparatively, there's an optimistic perspective here. So that's just all I would add.
That's fair enough. I would say that a lot of these things that we now look back upon as kind of like part of the American story and so on, were actually revolutions. The Civil War, most obviously, that was extremely violent, hundreds of thousands of dead due to that paradigm change. And if you were living in the New Deal era, we've all read about that in our high school history textbooks, and it all seems inevitable and good. If you were living at that time, you might have fairly said that we're experiencing fascism right now. So I would say I agree that you can be optimistic and that's healthy, but then I would still stress that, like, we might be at the end of a paradigm, and there's going to be something to replace this, and quite possibly what replaces this is not better, or it might be, though, but we'll see. All right, I'm going to give myself the last word. I am the host. So thank you for being on, and thank you for asking questions, and we will continue the conversation later. But I appreciate it. It's a good one. All right, talk to you guys later.
Thanks for this, Richard.
Ciao.